Good morning. It is Wednesday and time. Oh my goodness, my voice. I'm sorry. It is time for another Wednesday lecture online virtually. So, I'm probably not going to talk as long because we are almost done. Reminder again that we have a test on Friday. Um, And for those of you that want a lovely fall break where you don't have to think at all about APUSH, I would highly encourage you to get all your assignments done and turned in on Friday. So you can have a whole week where you don't think anything at all about APUSH. All right, so we were on page 7. I kind of want to go back because we kind of ended it fairly quickly about the birth of the party system. And particularly, I want to draw your attention to on page 7 that important. Your PSA that you're doing are Federalist and Anti-Federalist in regards to ratifying the Constitution. It's not the same as political parties. So please make sure that you read this little important, not to confuse the Federalists of the 1790s. Again, this is that idea of Federalists and Anti-Federalists are in regards to ratifying the Constitution. So your PSA should be about ratifying the Constitution, not these political parties, not all of these things. They're not the same. So please make sure that you know that. Federalists emerged again from the pre-constitutional period. And again, we really kind of talked in depth about them, that this is the party of the elite, that only the best people should be able to govern. And typically that's like people with property, people with education, people who are wealthy. And then on page 8, the Jeffersonians, they are government for the people, and the idea of an agrarian society and state overseeing and being more states' riders, that kind of thing. The biggest appeal is to the mid-class, underprivileged, and they are pro-French. And that's another way to really think about these people. The Jeffersonians, pro-French, pro-revolution. And the Federalists are going to be pro-British. And that's going to show up a lot over the next few years as we deal with foreign policy, which again, I kind of suggested that we are not really good at foreign policy. We're not really good at it at all. And we're going to make some disastrous mistakes. So the defeat of the American Indians, we got to kind of add a little sortie over to the side here about what's happening in the Northwest, in our neck of the woods, and it is finally getting rid of the Indians. So I have been hopefully mentioning a lot that you got it in your head that Great Britain has not left North America. They just moved a little further west. And one of the ways they think that they can cause havoc in this new nation and potentially get back their possessions is to incite Indians against the colonists, especially those colonists that are now moving into that disputed territory after the French and Indian War, mainly this part of the country. And they will help out Indians with weapons and any other kinds of activity that they think will cause difficulty to the Americans. And so we got to kind of wrap up Indians for a while. And when we do this, we won't really mention Indians until we get to after the Civil War again. So the defeat of the American Indians in the Old Northwest. We're the Old Northwest, Indiana. The Iroquois Nation forced into reservations in New York, Pennsylvania after the Revolutionary War. Many are going to go into Canada. But American Indians in the Northwest, especially the Shawnee and the Miami, are going to become very hostile toward Americans, mostly, as it says in B, supported by the British. Washington is going to lose 2 armies in the Northwest to the Shawnee and their allied tribes. So this is by no means over and done, nor is it a simple ending to the threat that the Americans feel from these native peoples. So this is a really big part of Indiana history. And those of you that are really have good memories of 4th grade in Indiana history, you should remember some of this, because this, again, is the Battle of Fallen Timbers. And it will take place in and around Ohio and Indiana, led by General Mad Anthony Wayne. Um, and climatic battle of fallen timbers, the Treaty of Grenville cleared 2/3 of Ohio and Indiana of Indian tribes. And this, for us, most importantly, the Treaty of Greenville is Britain abandoned its forts. So Britain's going to leave, which in essence takes away a lot of the power of the Indians, because that's from where they were getting a source of their weapons, of their support, the participation of the British. Eastern woodland American Indians now saw their lifestyles completely ruined by the increased competition for the fur trade, white settlement, and most importantly, ruining their hunting grounds by farming. And so they'll continue to move west, and they'll keep moving west as a result of the continued encroachment of the Americans and settlers into their land, and again, most importantly, ruining the hunting that they had. So we're going to leave that. That's just kind of a weird thing that just kind of hangs out there, but we do need to talk about that. So now we're going to look at the area that's going to cause the young United States of America a lot of difficulty: foreign policy. We just don't know how to do this, and it will be evident as we go through these things that we don't know how to do that. Right shortly after we become a country, all those French people that helped us, they go back to their country and say, wow, like we just fought for the liberty of these foreigners across the pond, and now we think we should do it too. And the United States is at a crossroads. Do they support the French Revolution, much like the French supported our revolution? That's the question. If we do that, we anger the British, a trading partner, even though we just were foes. But it's a difficult dilemma for this young United States, and especially since we don't know how to do this. So the most important issue is the French Revolution. How are we going to deal with the French Revolution? So Americans were initially pleased by this revolution, like, hey, we're doing it. We're the city on the hill. We're spreading this revolution. We're spreading democracy. Jefferson is all about it. Saw the French Revolution as the second chapter of the American Revolution. This is just part 2 of this great idea that begins in the United States, and everyone should overthrow oppressed people, or everyone should overthrow governments that are oppressing people. And up until 1792, everything was pretty easy to pick, right? It was pretty easy to say, yep, let's support France. They're doing great things. But then we begin, and those of you in my AP Euro will recall, the Reign of Terror. When, as in AP Euro, we say the rails come off the crazy train. It just goes way off the tracks of what really was supposed to be, and it truly is a reign of terror. King Louis and Marie Antoinette are beheaded. Thousands of people are executed. Church members, priests, thousands of them will be executed, and Christianity is going to be abolished. Notre Dame becomes the cult of the supreme being. It just goes wackadoodle. And Jeffersonians say, oh, bloodshed's regrettable, but probably can't be avoided. Federalists say, holy cow, here's that mob that we're afraid of. Here's that mob mentality that we've been warning against, showing and rearing its head in the French Revolution, and we need to be fearful of that. The French Revolution has become a world war. Britain's going to get sucked in. And on the top of page 10, D2, the United States had to decide which side to support when the war spreads to the Caribbean. And this is a dilemma for Washington. It is a very difficult dilemma, and one that will take all of his skill as a leader. So he takes a path of least resistance. And on the top of page 10, we have Washington's neutrality proclamations. Neutral means you don't pick a side. And that's what Washington advocates, that we're not going to pick a side. So the U.S. still obligated to France under the Franco-American alliance. And if you remember that alliance, when I said that's not going to be as important now as it will be in a few years. And now it's a few years later. And France says, you entered an alliance with us, and you need to honor that obligation. The U.S. had pledged to France to protect the French West Indies from enemies. And Jefferson's like, hey, we signed it. We did it. And Washington's like, hey, we really can't get sucked into this. This is what Washington is saying as both the president and as a former military leader. The biggest issue is there's no way we can defend ourselves. What Washington is afraid of is getting sucked into this war, France losing, Britain beating France, and then taking us back over. And I know, again, to all of us, that sounds crazy, but that was a real thing. And Washington, as a military leader, understood the precarious nation, the precarious place that we were as a nation. We could not defend ourselves again. He also knows that the only reason that we won was because of French help and French support and French troops and French money, which we no longer have. So that is a big problem. So President Washington believed war should be avoided at all cost. I'm going to just put this, and it's a good thing to write it now because I'm going to say it forever and ever and ever. The most important thing George Washington and John Adams do as president is keep us out of war. That is the single most important thing that they do. That probably gets shoved off to the side by most unwise historians or history buffs. That is the most significant thing they do because we were not prepared. And had we gone into war, serious doubt that the new nation would have prevailed. Seriously, could have been swept back in, if that's a word, swooped, I don't know, back in to a colony of England. And George Washington knew that. So he says, we got to stay out. Hamilton and Jefferson agree with that. Like, we can't fight. So we get this thing called the Neutrality Proclamation of 1793, letter C, announced U.S. neutrality in the war between Great Britain and France and warned citizens to be impartial to both Britain and France. Now, what that means for us economically, since we declared neutrality, that we can trade with both people, that we can sell to the French and sell to the British. And that's what we need. We still need to build ourselves up economically. And so for Hamilton, that's a win. Like, yeah, we get to keep these two really important trading partners. Americans are not going to be happy. Jeffersonians enraged because they didn't consult Congress. He just made this act on his own. Federalists are going to support this. Yep, we do not want to get involved. Why are Federalists going to support that? I'm pausing for you to think. Why are Federalists going to report that? Because it's revolution and they don't want any kind of mob, and they are seeing the results of mob rule and they don't like it and they're fearful of it. Page 3, Citizen Genet, and I'm pronouncing that in the best French way that I know how, is a French envoy. He is a really important person, and he looks to seek out U.S. profiteers. A profiteer is someone, I'm just out to make money. I don't care who you're fighting for. I don't care what your moral obligations are. I just want to make money. That's what a profiteer does. To outfit French ships and supply the French war cause, he's going to recruit Americans. Believe the Neutrality Act didn't truly reflect political opinions. He suggested bypassing, and Washington, on hearing all of this, demanded his withdrawal, and Genet will be replaced. It's a really big deal to replace an envoy or an ambassador. America and France are going to benefit from the U.S. neutrality. That means they can deliver foodstuffs to the West Indies. France doesn't officially ask the U.S. to honor, and so all of that is going to take hold. While on page 11, we go into all these treaties that we're trying to make. And we are not really good. I'm going to see how far I need to get. Hold on a second. Okay, I think I'll just do the treaties, and then tomorrow I think we can finish up. I'm going to finish up Washington. Okay, so on page 11, Jay's Treaty. So again, Britain is still hanging out there, still trying to make things miserable for us. We got to make some treaties with them, and we've got to make them pretty quick and get rid of the tension, get rid of the animosity, get rid of all of the issues with trade and the Atlantic Ocean. So John Jay goes on to make Jay's Treaty, and the significance of this is most important immediate cause for the formation of the Democratic Republican Party. Again, we are not good at this. John Jay is a Federalist, and these people say you gave in too much to the British. We're seeing the way this is going to go, and we don't like it. So, the background: British continued harassing American frontier settlers, the Indians, and ships on the ocean. One of the things that will happen, and one of the things that is difficult, is that until 1787, and we end the American Revolution, all of those people are British citizens. And Britain doesn't magically accept that on a certain day they are no longer British citizens. And so that's what one of the issues is at sea. Britain needs and always needs sailors in its gigantic navy. So one of the things they do is they look for sailors. So British remained in their northern frontier post, and again, helping the Indians, giving them firearms, alcohol to incite hullabaloo and all of those things. British Navy is going to keep taking U.S. ships because they were ours at one time, and we're going to take them back. And on page 11, B3, impressment. You need to put a box around that. You need to remember this word. This one word, is the reason for the War of 1812, impressment. College Board loves this word because it doesn't give you a single solitary clue about what it means. I'm going to try to make a connection. Impressment is being forced into the British Navy. So what British ships would do, they would pull alongside weaker, less well-defended American ships, board, and then anybody they thought was a British citizen, they will take them off the ship and press them into service and say, "Whoop, you're no longer. We think you're a British citizen, and so now you're in the His Majesty's Navy." And that was it. And they took hundreds of sailors, seamen on ships, hundreds of them, and we could do nothing to stop it. This is part of the reason that we needed to move into this treaty. Federalists say we're not going to war with Britain again. We know that we cannot do that. U.S. depended on 75% of its custom duties from British. Jefferson argued that U.S. should impose an embargo. An embargo means no trade, and we're going to see Jefferson tries that, and it is bad news when he's president. So, in the midst of all this, Washington sends Jay, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, to London to figure out some kind of treaty. Jeffersonians feared the conservative Jay would sell out the U.S. interest. Hint, hint, he kind of does. Hamilton secretly gives Britons the bargaining strategy. This is another mark on the other side of Hamilton. So, it's always interesting. I'm going to go side note. It's always interesting, this battle between Jefferson and Hamilton, because people either love either one of them. But they both have very, very positive qualities that helped in the founding of the nation, and they both have very negative qualities. Hamilton gives Britain the bargaining strategy that we're going to use in Jay's treaty. He says, here's what's going to happen. Here you go. That's why a lot of people don't like Alexander Hamilton. Not me, but a lot. Because he does things like this all the time, trying to ingratiate himself into a world where he doesn't feel welcome. So, Jay is severely handicapped. It's kind of like how the New England Patriots always have the plays, and why they win. Because they cheat, because they always have the playbook of someone else. Kind of like what Hamilton just did. That was for you, Finn. All right, so the provisions of Jay's treaty. America is going to win few things. They are not going to get much. British renewed their pledge to remove their posts from the U.S. soil. So we're going to do that. We're going to continue to remove them. We're not going to tell you when. We're not going to tell you how long it's take. We're just going to continue to do that. British consented to pay damages for recent seizures of American ships. However, we refuse to guarantee against future ones and future impressments. So let's see if we get this right. Okay, we'll pay you for the ones that we think we already did, but we're not going to stop doing it. That doesn't sound like a really good treaty for the United States. And please look at E4. United States forced to pay pre-revolution debts owed to the British merchants. What? We won that war. Why are we paying debts? We won. This is still not a good way for the Americans to conduct foreign policy. We don't know what we're doing. As you would think, Jefferson and Jeffersonians are outraged at this, and as a result, they now will form the Democratic Republican Party, which sounds so weird to our ears, right? The Democratic Republican Party. It sounds weird. This eventually is going to be the Democratic Party. Eventually, this will become just the Democratic Party. South felt betrayed that the North would make them pay for damages. Southern planters would be taxed to pay pre-Revolutionary War debts. However, the most important thing that Jay was sent there to do by President Washington is at the bottom: war with Britain averted. George Washington is going to spend 8 years trying to stay out of war, or not go to war, with Great Britain, and he is successful, even though this whole page looks horrible. Like, what? Who would agree to that? If you're trying to stay out of war and make a new country, you would agree to that, and Washington does. The bottom of page 12, the top of page 12 is the Pinckney Treaty of 1795, and it'll be ratified by the Senate in 1796. Normalized relations with Spain. And Spain's declining. They are nose diving, tanking, and they need some kind of alliance, reassurance that they kind of still fit in this world. And so for them, that's really what it was. For us, it was free navigation of the Mississippi River into New Orleans. That was what we needed. We needed navigation of the Mississippi. We needed navigation of the port of New Orleans. And we get that in this treaty. And then C2 yielded a large area north of Florida that had been in dispute, and we get Florida. So that's a really important treaty. That's a check plus for foreign policy for the United States. And then lastly, we're going to end President Washington's term. Now, President serves 2 terms, 8 years, and he accepts a second term in which he is again unanimously reelected. So the dude serves 4 years and everybody still loves him. Everybody still says there's nobody else we would want to be president than you. So he is elected unanimously again. That's unheard of, right? Washington starts to lose his nonpartisan when he becomes a Federalist, and he refuses to accept a third term. He does it for a lot of reasons. One, he doesn't want to set up this idea of some kind of monarch, some kind of king. Like, that's what we don't want. We don't want that. There should be a turnover of power, and there should be a turnover peacefully of this power of the United States. It is, again, one of the things that stands out in the history of the United States: peaceful transfer of power. For over 200 years, we have peacefully turned over power. There is no other country in the world that can say that from one election to the next, presidents just hand the keys. Many of them write really nice letters. There's a whole book of all the letters that former presidents have written to the future president. And we hand over the keys and say, here you go. Because, my friends, ultimately that house is not the president's house. That house is the people's house. It belongs to us. And our elections move that in that direction. And so Washington says there should be turnover. It shouldn't just be me. We should have different people. And then also, ultimately, he says, I am tired. Like, this wears me out. There's also a book that shows pictures of presidents the day they're elected, and they take the oath to become president, and then it also is a picture of them 4 years later, and oh my gosh, how they've aged. Woo! Really aged. It takes a lot out of you. So he refused to set third term as president. He sets the precedent for 2 terms, and no one is going to serve more than 2 terms. There will be lots of presidents that want to do that. Jackson will want to do that. Theodore Roosevelt will want to do that. Roosevelt, FDR does do that 4 times. And that's when we get the constitutional amendment that says, nope, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to keep that at 2. He is exhausted and he is ready to go home. He has fought for the country. He has run this new country. He has set it in motion in the most fantastic way possible. And it's time to stop. So his farewell address, he writes a speech at the end. And there is no doubt, I'm going to go back, there's no doubt he would have easily got a 3rd term. Whether it would have been unanimous or not, most historians say no, but he certainly would have been elected to a 3rd term. Easy peasy. So his farewell address to his life as a patriot, his life as a military officer and a leader of the Continental Army, his farewell to his role as the first president of the United States. That's what he's doing. And in this farewell address, big giant box, if you see, everything is underlined because it's a really important address. It's one of the few speeches by a president that the College Board asks you questions a lot about. Washington, Lincoln, and Eisenhower. Those are the only ones that you're asked anything about. Warned against the evils of political party. And my friends, I don't think we can say anything else about that except we should have listened. Warned against permanent foreign alliances. He said these foreign alliances, they're going to do us in. We should not make permanent foreign alliances. And we didn't until we got better at it. And that will take a long time until after World War II, till when we get better at it. Jeffersonians will be angered. Speech seen to declare U.S. hostility toward France. And D4. Please put a giant box around this because this is, again, important. Isolationism becomes the dominant U.S. foreign policy. We just isolate ourselves. We become like an ostrich with our head in the sand. And we refuse to participate. We isolate and insulate ourselves from everything else going on in the world. Mostly because we need to make a nation. We need to build a nation. And we need to develop some kind of skills for our diplomats so that we can negotiate on an equal level turf, which we can't now. That, again, is the most important. On page 12E, again, cannot be lost in the shuffle. He keeps the United States out of war. For 8 years, he keeps the United States out of the war. And then F is a review of George Washington's precedent. Rely and consulted regularly with his cabinet. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that. Chief executive gained the right to choose his own cabinet members. 2-term for office. And after Jay resigned, Washington went outside the Supreme Court to select a new Chief Justice. All right, so that ends. Remember, tomorrow we'll finish up our notes. We'll have a quiz, and then our tests will be on Friday. And this is right at 30 minutes, right where I wanted to be. I hope you guys have a great Wednesday. Please make good use of your time. Do some of your APUSH so that you're not just cramming it all in the night before. I promise you, it really helps you on test if you do your homework. Okay? All right, have a great day. Email me if you have any questions, and we'll see you here tomorrow. Bye.